Good afternoon and welcome to the What's Up With That podcast in a series that we're coming up. It's a podcast, actually it's a Christian podcast, and it focuses on theological concepts. We want to deal with issues such as the Jesus of Christ and the Jesus of history and what's the difference and what does that mean for us. There's the doctrine of the Trinity and a whole lot of other things that as Christians we talk about. We celebrate, but sometimes we don't always fully understand what it means. And our hope is that in our time together, we can clarify some stuff. But we don't want to stop there, because we also want to deal with the church. And we understand it can be some stuff going on in the church. So I'm just going to mention one topic that is the top of my mind that we hope to deal with, and that's bullies in the church. That can be a real issue from time to time. And I serve as president of an interfaith group in Austin, Texas. And I do believe that interfaith conversations are very, very important. That's just a taste of what this podcast is going to be about. We have a guest with us today that's going to make this time with us today phenomenal. I'm on the continent of Africa, the motherland, and it was so wonderful to see after we got off the plane. And I'm here, for those who might be familiar with me, Don Brington Chaplain in Austin, here for with a bunch of students for a service trip. But as we got off the plane, it was wonderful to see in the airport, "Welcome to the motherland." And so we landed in Africa, and we are in Cape Town, South Africa, and we are in the city, or we are in the township of Lenga. I want to get that right, and in a minute our guest is going to make sure that I got it right. And we've been here, this is our second year here in the township of Lenga. And while we are here, we do service work. We have the blessed opportunity to engage the community and really walk around and get to know the people. And we have a couple of sessions. It's meant to be service, it's meant to be a learning experience, and it's meant to be an opportunity that affords students a cultural experience as well. And in that learning experience last year, there was an awesome young woman who was introduced to us. And she did a lecture and talked about South Africa. And that is none other than our guest today, Dr. Nompilo.
Yay!
Yay! Glad to have you with us here today. And I'm so grateful because I thought about it. And as I looked at starting this podcast, it was, you're going to South Africa. I have some segments that we're going to be dealing with. Probably we're going to hit them about June. But I did want to begin at least get a couple of podcasts out to share with folks. And I thought, why don't you ask her? And I am so grateful that as I approached you with the idea, you didn't hesitate. You didn't but and maybe let me think about it. You said, yes, it's a wonderful idea. And I am so grateful. I almost started doing a dance.
Okay.
Just what you know, I almost started doing a dance.
I should like to see that dance, actually.
Well, that might happen one day, okay? And maybe even before we leave South Africa.
Okay.
But what I want to do, Dr. Nompilo.
You're doing all right.
Nompilo.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
Is not her full name. Now I asked her, can I get your full name so that I can put the full name out there? I'm doing pretty good with Nompilo. Every now and then but I'm doing pretty good. But I don't want to mess up her name. And so since she's going to tell you her name, we'd like for her to share the university where she teaches. She is a professor, and she does other things as well. A phenomenal woman she is. And want her to tell her just a little bit about what her name and where it is that she works. Okay. Dr. Nompilo, yay! Glad to have you with us.
Woo-hoo. Okay. Hello, everybody. Formally, I go by Dr. Nompilo Cindy Ndlovu, but because I'm with family, I don't use titles. So Nompilo is absolutely perfect.
Great.
Yeah. I am a daughter. I am one of many siblings. I am a sister, and I am I am a child of God, I am an academic, and I'm a community practitioner at heart. So I am African, that I never want to be apologetic for. I am Black, and I think I just embrace a lot of things in myself. I'm open to learning and meeting new people, and that's why this program means a lot to me. I was telling you before we started, it never leaves me. I meet so many students in my life, but the HTU group, it doesn't leave me. It teaches me lessons about myself. So what an honor to see you back for the second year in a row.
Well, thank you, sir, so very much. Thank you for the work that you've done with our students, and need you to know that they love you. You were sharing about yourself, and rather, can I mention also that we're also at Bridges Academy. Got to give them a shout out. I don't know if you can see this wonderful mural behind me, but it's a wonderful academy here in the township of Langa. We were talking about being here in South Africa in the township of Langa, your profession in which you are a professor of history, and what really excited me about getting you on is that last year and also this year, I think you spoke to our group on last evening, actually Monday and last evening. You talk about the history of South Africa.
Okay.
One, as we, and sometimes in the United States, and not everybody, please understand, we understand that there is not always a negative perception of what it means to be African, what it means to be here in Africa. But sometimes there is. And if I had to be honest, last year, when we were coming to Africa, and always wanted to make this journey, right? But there was a thought for a few minutes, because you hear about political coups. You hear about governments taking over and war, and you've got to be careful because you might be kidnapped. And for just a moment, I honestly had that thought.
Okay.
But somewhere within me, it said, that's not it. I deserve the experience, and the students deserve the experience. Get over it and enjoy it. And it has been amazing for 2 years in a row. So I'd like for you to share with us some of what you share with our students, some of the history of South Africa, this area where we are visiting.
Okay. All righty. Thank you. It's very difficult to talk about the history of South Africa specifically, because it's interconnected to the other regions around it. Zimbabwe, Botswana, Lesotho, and everything. And really, as an academic exercise, and based on the way that the African map was cut in 1886, we've actually confined ourselves to very small enclaves of what our history is. But the history was actually across community, across tribe, and across a larger geography. So now they would say there are about, say, 13 Southern African countries, and would try to distinguish them. But the truth of the matter is that once they were very interrelated and they coexisted. So for example, I come from Zimbabwe. I come from a place called Bulawayo. So I would obviously carry a different passport to a South African. But my forebears...
So you need a passport to get to other countries in Africa, even within Africa.
Yeah, but my forebears actually left during the Mfekane in the early 1800s, and were moving for more land, in the resource crunch land, and just what people would call black on black violence. I've always had a problem with that term, and eventually landed in Zimbabwe. But you also find some of those people in Zambia. You find some of those people in modern day Mozambique. They'll call themselves Zulu, Ndebele, Ngoni, Shangani, but they all have a similar root. So we're all having to function as independent countries, and yet the truth of the matter is that we kind of coexisted as kingdoms. So I will give the history of South Africa on its own, but it's erroneous, because South Africans are part of the Southern African community, and very much their beliefs, their ways of doing cross cultures. But the history of Southern Africa has a lot of migration in it. It has wars, conquests, wars for land, resources. It has very many of the strange pictures that you have seen, the developmental pictures, the developmental issues.
Can I ask you a question? I don't mean to interrupt, but you said the strange pictures. When you say strange pictures, what kind of strange pictures are you talking about?
For me, they're strange because I'm an African. The flies on the nose, the big belly children, the naked children, or the ones that are all fighting for food. Yeah, what Africa has come to represent a lot of different things for different people, based on who is defining its history. Our other problem with South African history is that it has always started in 1652, at least as they teach it in schools, based on when the colonizer arrives, because that's what somebody would say this is history. But I'd like to believe that the people have a much longer history than that. And the oldest skull is actually a Southern African skull. It's an African skull. So we know that from anthropology that we are one of the oldest peoples. So to start us in 1652 in a time chronology is very erroneous, because if we go 2,000 years back or 5,000 years back to the long history, then you get to know about the San people, who were the first peoples in this land. Most of them don't exist anymore. And you also get to talk about how people didn't even refer to themselves as tribes and ethnicities, but referred to themselves as kings, kingdoms, nationhoods, and were thriving. And
so what moved, what did it cause them to, if they didn't do that in its origin, when it began, what caused that to happen that way?
What changed from people believing that they were owners and they were kings and they had autonomy?
Yes.
A lot of things, but I think the colonial project is probably the most damaging. It's not the only thing that would have impacted how the changes that happened, but it's the most damaging, because it comes with it extreme violence. It comes with it religious practices that are very different to the people being forced on them. It also comes with it pillage, stealing the land, the wealth, the resources, and actually subjugating a people that initially believed that they were free. And if you not only believed but lived freely and owned the land and understood the lay of the land better, it's impossible to tell me that somebody who arrives from the Netherlands or the Dutch people is going to come and know how to plant in that land better than the local. Right. So by the time you hear of these commercial schemes, growing schemes that they were doing, bringing development, it's a very condescending way of doing, because you're almost trying to say before 1652 or before 1795, when Britain takes over South Africa, what was there did not exist. Okay. And what you're doing is cancelling millions of people's realities from generations way before.
So then, how is it when you have an original people here in the land who are capable, able, and who are actually managing the land, developing the land, who are being prosperous? How is it that a British colony can come in and take that land?
War. If you've ever heard of the cattle killings amongst the isiXhosa, where literally they were slaughtering of people's animals and stuff like that, burning their crops. And you do this in enough years in a row to actually create conditions of starving. Also disease, right? You bring certain diseases which are not local, and then people pass. But there were a lot of arrests also being made of key leaders, which will almost make the people opt to subjugate themselves. So for example, I'll give you an example. Where we are right now, we're in a township called Langa Township. The full name of the township is Langa Libalele. This means when the sun is fully out. That's what that name means.
And it's fully out today.
Yeah. Langa Libalele, right? In my language, right? It could mean something else in another iteration, maybe closer. King Langa Libalele is a very prominent king. He was one of the Xhosa kings. He represented one of the many Xhosa kingdoms that existed before the tribal project. He, for example, just totally refused to be subjugated by the colonizer. It didn't matter what they did. He wouldn't pay the Dutch tax, because nothing they made locals pay Dutch tax and hat tax. Forced them to pay for their own land and everything, and he just totally refused. He refused to bow down to just the colonial powers at the time, and he actually ended up being arrested in Robben Island as a result.
Wow.
Because of the fact that he just didn't understand why, if he was a king, that he needed to have his power usurped. So that would have meant his people are tortured, his people are killed, his things are taken. But actually what will happen is that when you just forcefully arrest somebody for political subjugation or something, and you put them in a place like Robben Island, which if you've been to, requires the strongest of swimmers to get through. But even then, I don't actually know that anybody has successfully escaped Robben Island, because the water is quite cold. So even when you're a strong swimmer, the water is too far. So for years he was arrested. So what will happen to a people when their king is gone is that they will surrender. So I mean, things like that will kind of show you what would have happened. Also at the time, the missionaries had a huge role in proselytizing the community. So they often went at the same time with soldiers who tended to use violent means. The missionaries also abuse, I think, the word of peace.
Okay. I'm going to, for a moment, can we come back to the missionary piece? I'd like to take that in isolation.
Yeah.
But you talked about a political system. So what is the political system in Africa that perhaps came about as a result of colonization? So what is that system like that seeks to keep a people subjugated, if that's an appropriate term?
I don't know what the political system of Africa is. I think there are many political systems. As we know it, Africa is currently home to 55 nationalities, and in every nation you have so many different types of people and groups of people in one nation alone. So for me, just as a historical and a political issue, there's always been the need to standardize everything that is African. Whatever some certain closer families would have practiced as politics and order would have been different in a different place. So I can never tell you that there is one system. There were different systems at play. But all that needs to be known is that people were governed. They had ways of governing, whether it was through the monarchy, whether it was through the army, whether it was a patriarchal society or a matriarchal. People were governed. People went to school. They may have had other informal ways of education, but they were very much educated in what they needed to know. How to be a hunter-gatherer, how to be wise, how to make decisions, how to do justice, how to plant food, how to do medicine, what indigenous medicine means. So I do know that those systems existed. They may have had the term indigeneity associated to them, which is also an issue. I mean, every time people speak about African things that existed or their development, they'll say there were some indigenous things, as if you almost need to use the word indigenous. We need to say there was medicine in the same way that there was medicine in the US. There was justice in the same way that there was justice.
I appreciate that history. I'd like to ask. We've been here for 7 days. I think maybe 8 today. We've had the opportunity to travel through Cape Town. And many of our students were amazed because when we got to Cape Town, it's like, I won't say Austin, it's bigger than Austin, Texas, all right? You're talking about Houston, Chicago, right? But then you travel about 15 to 20 minutes and you get to the township of Lenga. And when you get to the township of Lenga, it has its parts where there are those who are living well. But a large part of it are the people in poverty. And took a ride with one of the organizations we were working with here, Meals on Wheels. And there was a community that my heart almost broke.
Okay.
Right? So what is it about systems and structures that allows that to happen today?
Okay. 1948 really, and the apartheid government further entrenches certain policies. The National Party, others will call it the Afrikaner government, really just took to the next level what colonization had already started. These guys were policy happy, man. They had policies for everything, mixed marriages, Bantu Education Act. You are black, therefore you should have Bantu education versus. They were very much about divisions. And so that's where we end up having the racial categories.
Okay.
White, black, colored, Indian, and that each deserve different amounts and different different resources.
Right.
So this is how, when you came in and you saw everything so developed and beautiful, then you associated it to the minority because that's what they felt they were owed, right? They institutionalized race. Whereas in a past system where Africans had to carry passes to survive, they were relegated to the outskirts of the city, and usually where they weren't seen. Because guess what? You know what? Wealthy white South Africans needed domestic help. They needed cleaners, what they would have called house girls, and they needed gardeners, what they would have called garden boys. And so actually they were not going to be seen. The idea was that they should live in the outskirts and they should go and serve those people. So actually it's a political system which we are sold today mostly, which speaks of democracy, which has been set politically in the world as a better system to what many Africans may have done on their own. But it doesn't necessarily look like it has made life better. It has brought inequality. It has always actually never stood up for the rights of the black man. It has benefited itself from being an academic theory and whose practice has always disempowered the African. So this is democracy. It's the fact that the Africans are all stuffed in langa away from the eyes, and everybody else is in this beautifully developed city. And they voted those ideas in because they were allowed to vote. The black man wasn't allowed to vote before 94. So I guess they were making decisions on behalf of. Yeah. They were taking power for, right? They entrenched power dynamics in their democracy.
And what really was astounding is that as you talked, and as you're talking now, that's democracy, right?
Right.
We're in the middle of an election in the United States, and right now I'm getting a little excited because the parallels are so amazing, right? Folks say, well, at least we're not in Africa, but the parallels are so amazing. We talk about democracy. One of the issues now is we have a Republican group that's, in my opinion, is crazy. We have a Democratic group that I'm a Democrat. I think Biden is doing well. I think he's done a great job. Yeah. But at the same time, we have nothing and no one better to replace him.
Okay.
We talk about democracy in a system where you try to pull the votes of people of color, but what you do, you don't do those kinds of things that are really going to benefit those people of color. And if I may be a little bit more pointed, because I'm black, but you don't do that which elevates a black community in a real and in a significant way. Yet you want them to be Democrats. For me, it's something wrong with the picture.
Right.
We might do a little bit more than put a playground in the projects, but now putting a playground in my projects, it's called elevation. Something wrong with that picture, right? So I don't know if you can identify with that.
They elevate stocks and stuff like that. They buy stocks and everything. Then our elevators, what, 1 or 2 playgrounds in Africa. Of course, the well. I mean, the well is like the epitome of elevation. And then they're right. You are correct. The political systems as we know it are not suited necessarily to address African issues. And it seems that would be the same with you guys.
The system is not really built to address the issues of a black community in a significant way. I'm going to say there are incremental kinds of things and very small things, and they happen very slowly. But is it really making a big difference? No.
And it's actually an issue in a country like South Africa where the majority of the population are the Africans, the black populace. And when I mean black, I mean it's the black spelled with a big B, which stands for black as in Indian, colored, and African. So normally when we use the big B, we represent anybody who was brown and black, who wasn't white, who form, a serious and extreme majority of the nation. So you are right to say, now that they are the voter population, which they weren't before 94, right? I can see how whiteness at that time would have pushed their own agenda and developed life for themselves. How are we seeing that in a new time after Nelson Mandela comes in? The politics is that the majority of the populace are voting and are winning. This is how you get the ANC party winning, but it's still not trickling down to the communities or making any difference. But I want to blame the new governments because they've also created out of themselves an African bourgeoisie elites. They've done exactly what the their white counterparts did before them. But I guess when they didn't have that life, they wanted it.
Right.
So now that they have it, they drive the Rolls Royces. They put their children in private school out of the country. They are corrupt in the same way that the others were corrupt. And that's another matter that comes into it as well. But if I have to be compassionate about it, it is never fair to expect new black governments, even though the majority are voting for them now. It is never fair for a country that got freedom in 1994, 30 years later, to expect them to undo what others did for 400 years. They're arriving into a country where things have been pillaged already. Systems have been set in place, economic systems, banking systems, and they're teenagers compared to what was done.
Right.
And they have done harm. But in the name of democracy, they also haven't had the kind of time. They haven't had the kind of time or experience, because the other things that when were they ruling countries? These guys were fighting liberation wars, not just in South Africa. In Zimbabwe, people were guerrillas, not just in Zimbabwe. In just about all the countries, Zambia, Tanzania, we used to call them the frontline movement. In Southern Africa, the idea was that if you got one country free, you're going to get all countries free. So for years, Zambia had over 11 liberation parties there across from South Africa, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, practicing so they would come back to the country and snatch it from the minority. So when you have been a guerrilla for 10 years and you've been fighting in the bush, and then you come back and you take over a country, and they tell you this is what is democracy, they're almost setting you up for a fail.
Exactly.
Yeah, and yet for you, maybe you are used to monarchy rule or authoritarianism or something else. I don't know what else was there. I'm not saying it was better. It may even have been a patriarchal system, but it doesn't mean that that's not what is more intuitive to that person.
You are passionate about this, aren't you? I feel your passion. I'd like to make a deal, and we need to get together. And between Africa and the United States of America, we need to make some real changes. We don't have a whole lot of time left, but I do want to hit one more issue, if I may. There is an issue. Can I maybe backdoor this and share a story?
Okay.
And then ask you what you think about it.
Okay.
You are familiar with Dr. James Cone, right?
Yes.
African American liberation theologian, black
Absolutely.
theology.
I mean, yeah, his works are huge.
Yeah. I had the privilege when I was in seminary, and it's been more than yesterday, but when I was in seminary, to do an intern in New York at what was then the World Council of Churches. Worked with Church World Services, and that was the year that all missionaries had to return to the States, right? You can be a missionary in any country in the world, but when you serve, I believe they said after 3 years, you had to come back stateside for a certain amount of time, and then you can go back out, right? In this intern, we were privileged to be a part, well, I was working with Church World Service, right? So we were privileged to, when they had this conference of all of their missionaries throughout the world come back, we were privileged to be a part of that, right? It was myself and 6 other interns, 5 other interns. I made 6, right? Dr. James Cone was the speaker in residence. So, I mean, it was for a week, and since he was a speaker in residence, it means that every evening he was a highlighted speaker.
I see.
Right? And he was doing, I mean, he was hitting stuff left and right, theology and what was going on in the world and how we deal with people and all this good stuff. And I met a woman, right? And she's a white woman.
Okay.
And I don't know, it's been 25 years maybe. Okay. So I don't know where she is, but I'm not going to call her. Can I give her a makeup name?
Give her a makeup name.
We'll say Susie, right? I met Susie, and Susie and I had some wonderful conversations in the evening, right? After he would get through speaking, and I don't know why, but Susie and I would get together, and we'd have dinner, and she was so supportive and affirmative of James Cone and what he was saying, and how right he was, and how the people who were there didn't need to get angry because he was speaking truth to power, right? And that was the thing, speak truth to power. He was speaking truth to power, so he was okay. Well, on this particular evening, James Cone began to talk about missionaries. And he began to really hit hard on the role in going to other countries, Africa and other countries within the world. Conversations that, they did not go and seek to meet the needs of the people. They went with their own agenda. And, stuff, he talked and Sissy began to get puffed. All right. In fact, Sissy got so puffed that on that evening when we had dinner, the only thing she says, that man, how dare he? And the only thing I said is, did he say anything that was true? And remembering, you have, in the early part of the week, applauded him for speaking truth to power.
Yeah.
So what are you saying? Is he all of a sudden not speaking truth? And she said, well, yes, but that's not true of everybody. I don't do that. To which I replied, Sissy, you may not do it, but if you don't speak out against it, you are guilty by your silence.
You're a bystander.
As a person who is from Africa, how do you perceive the role of missionaries in the world? Can that be a first one? Because after you get to doing that, I also want to ask, how do you perceive those who come to do missionary in Africa now? We're here to do, I've changed it since last year. We were doing missionary, spring break mission
You're right,
trips.
and this year you came to do service.
And this year it was our spring break. I changed it.
I remember, we spoke about this.
Yeah,
Like, are you missionaries or are you doing service?
Yeah. So one, your thoughts.
Yeah.
And your expressions.
Okay.
On the missionary who came to help Africa.
Yeah.
Were they helpful or were they harmful?
I like the use of your word help because they already came with the idea that they were coming to fix a problem, right? And I'm sorry that you're hearing this again because we spoke about it yesterday.
It's
but
okay.
This whole idea that a lot of the texts that you have on Africa were written by missionaries. They were the first people in the ground before anybody else knew what was going on. So they often, and historical texts will show that they exaggerated by far the state of what Africa was so that they could look like they were needed and they were useful, so that their sending stations could keep sending them. So they are the ones that started the whole idea of barbaric, dark continent, what the African brain does not develop. So I mean, half these ideas that we have now, I don't think started from nowhere. I think they started from colonizers who actually came with missionaries. So I don't know what they're coming to help when they're already arriving in a place where they think black is less. Yeah. In fact, they think black does not exist, which is how you can take away the land of a black person when they're there, because if you categorize them, they are not a people.
All right.
Right? They are uncivilized. Those are the words they used. And until they can engage in our modern life, right, they need to be civilized. So the issue for me is that the intention of the missionaries was never right. They never came to co-create learning. Okay. They came to undo everything that was there, right? So there's a time that they delete the education system of, hunting, whatever people need to do to survive at that time. They do away with it, and then they replace it with knowledge as we know it today. A lot of people have that knowledge, but they can't do anything with it. You would much rather know how to till the land,
yes,
than you would going to grade 1 and learning maths, if it is that you cannot do anything with it afterwards. So informal education mattered because it taught people how to survive in their place. So the ideas of education they destroyed because they always assumed that the other would be better. Recently, the Anglican Church actually acknowledged their complicity in a lot of the conflicts, the genocides in Southern Africa. Right? They would know when wars were happening. They often also played people against each other. They used the word as a reason for people to get benefits. If you were saved, you could go to school and get an education. If you were barbaric, then they could sanction that you were destroyed. They also brought ideas of gender that are not necessarily normative for African communities. A mother, a maternal figure, was a person of high value. They had value in society, but so did the role of sons, so it was the role of daughters, so was the role of different people. The church, as it arrived from missionaries, were white men, right? And their women or their families served them, and they created what for them was a structure of what is a typical family, a gendered structure, which over the years people had to follow. I actually associate extreme patriarchy with the missionaries who came. They didn't do things in a gendered way, but in a typical African culture, you make the mother of the nation, of that people, you give them such high respect, right? How is it that in a time before missionaries, Africans wore loin cloths and they moved around fine? They didn't cover their tops, what other people call nude. And then you arrive as a Christian and then you say, this is nude, you are naked, you're obscene, do the right thing and wear clothing, right? Because that's the way gentlemen are, you cover. That's the way women are, you cover. And yet in this era post that, we have so much sexual violation in this day and age. And yet when people used to walk around nude, millions of people nude, I'm not saying they were utopian perfect society, that wasn't the order of the day.
Right.
That wasn't the issue. So this idea that a person will misunderstand a context, force their ideas down, and then change it so that the damage afterwards is so irreparable. So their stance on education for me was off, because in order to make Eurocentric knowledge better, they obliterated indigenous knowledge. Their stance on gender and family structures is off. Another stance that I think is particularly interesting is the fact that they also began to code the languages that we actually study now. If you study Xhosa or isiZulu or Ndebele, the dictionaries are all written by missionaries. Udok, Kolenso, whatever. They would literally take Africans, put them in their houses, listen to them, and create clicks and sounds as they went. And almost every single African dictionary, the foundational document, is actually done by missionaries. So you're listening, you have no idea what's a click and what's not. So you actually create things. You almost want to insist that the alphabet, the English alphabet, is the best way. So you will squish the languages into 27 letters if you must. But that's the alphabet. And the worst thing is that you're going to insist that a sentence must have a verb and a proverb and an adjective. So they literally curated what we call uhlelo. Language and linguistics as we know it was created by missionaries for Africa, and those are the scripts that we use. So you're even having African languages forcing themselves into proverbs, nouns, whatever. The seminal readings on African people are all written by missionaries. So it has impacts, because in the end, South Africa alone has 60 million people. The language that they speak is curated by one or two people who heard it by just listening and thought this is an interesting project. That's the case in Zimbabwe. That's the case and you do harm. And because there were so many languages, because South Africa and Southern Africa, so many languages, they end up just lumping things together. They couldn't figure out how long it would take. So for example, the Xhosa nationhood as we know it has in it Amampondo, Amahlubi. It has so many different types of people whose dialect is not the same.
Right.
So how do you decide the Xhosa that's spoken in South Africa is this one? They were so obsessed with standardizing. So they went to about 16 nationhoods and they say, this is the Xhosa that you will speak henceforth. Doak has written it. This is your dictionary. And how did he choose? Maybe he picked the king that he liked. Maybe the king who had given their life to God, standardized. So we're losing language, we're losing ways because they wrote them, which is also an issue.
Okay, so what I can say is from your statement that there has been much harm done. Time is getting short,
okay.
and our group is about to move, and I want to thank you for being here. I really wanted to talk about missionaries and what they do today and how you perceive that.
Can I answer that quickly so that we close your interview or not?
Answer quickly as you close the interview, and then before we actually close it, I want to point out something.
Okay. I think the issue wasn't who missionaries were, it's what they represented. I think the modern day missionary knows God and serves God in their heart and lives out that work. They don't need to travel all the way to Africa to be a missionary. You guys are missionary in your day-to-day world. And the modern understanding of missionary I can accept. It's somebody who God fears and somebody who serves and somebody who lives a Christ-like life. And I think there is room for the modern missionary in a time when the world has changed, because our understanding and our concept of Christ and doing Christ is different. It's inspired by love, humility, the ability to learn, community, And so there is room today for a missionary, whereas the older missionary, there wasn't room for.
It's wonderful to know that as people who love God and who serve Christ, I think sometimes we use that word Christian too loosely.
Yeah.
But it's people who
Christ-like.
love God and
Yeah.
serve Christ and seek to be Christ-like,
Yeah.
that we're doing a better job.
Yeah.
I want to hang out with you again. I heard your click a couple of times, right?
Yes.
And a click is part of the
Yeah.
classic language, right?
Yeah, I've got a cue for you.
Yeah, do a click for me.
Okay, I will. I'll do a sentence. I'll do a sentence with cues.
Okay.
Uma uqede, ugeqe, uqethu.
You better go, girl.
It's
You gotta go, girl.
It's a tongue twister, like how you guys would do red lorry, yellow lorry. When we grew up, we'd say, "Uma uqede, ugeqe, uqethu." Yeah. But
All
that's
right.
the cue.
All right. I appreciate having you here. Thank you so much for being here. And while we may have to get together again long distance, we're going to do this again, even if it has to be through Zoom. And I hate Zoom.
That's all
but
right.
To have you here and to have conversation with you has been it's amazing. And we must do this again.
All right.
Can we agree to do that?
Absolutely.
Can I give you a hug?
Yeah, of course you can.
All right. We end with join us in another few weeks as we look at the issues of all things spiritual religious and ask the question, what's up with that?